Okay, I'm giving myself under 10 minutes to go through 10 commandments. First of all, if you look at them in a sort of impressionistic way, just glance at them, you'll be probably overwhelmed by the archaic and perhaps off-putting character of them. They seem very patriarchal, as references to coveting your neighbour's donkey and your neighbour's wife. They seem to show us a God who's a punishing, vengeful God, and they're stuck in the middle of the Old Testament, where all sorts of things like God smiting people and God being jealous and angry occur. But if you actually focus on the commandments themselves, you'll get a very different impression as they come into greater clarity if you investigate them. When first of all, the first commandment about worshipping God, placing God at the center of your life rather than anything else, rather than an idol. Thing about idols, worshipping anything rather than God, putting your ultimate faith in anything other than God, is that an idol will inevitably break, either literally, if it's a statue you've made, ultimately, and Old Testament is full of references to people worshipping things that they've actually made rather than the creator of heaven and earth, and saying how absurd this is. And in a sense, I suppose it is genuinely so. And when we worship things other than God, place our ultimate faith in some other person, perhaps, which is very unfair on the person, or in some movement or party or whatever, those things will let you down because they're not ultimate. They may be very good in their way, they may be very lovely in their way, but they are not the creator of heaven and earth. Now, it says in the first commandment that God will punish to the third or fourth generation those who reject him, but will reward those who love him to the 1000th generation. And this sounds very severe, but look at the difference. Third or fourth generation, this is very limited punishment, and yet God's mercifulness is to the thousandth generation, i.e. unlimited, effectively. So limited punishment, unlimited mercy and love. It's not as horrible as it appears. And so on to taking the Lord's name in vain. I don't think this primarily refers to bad language, though cheapening the name of God in bad language is something that is, to my mind, being something to be avoided. And if you're going to swear, some good old Anglo-Saxon four-letter words will be preferable to my mind, rather than saying Jesus Christ or for God's sake or oh God or Jesus wept or something, which I find actually quite offensive. But I suppose it's about swearing oaths as well, and also not trying to invoke the name of God as if God were a genie in a bottle or a pagan demon or something, but actually honoring the name of God. And the Jews honored the name of God primarily by not actually uttering it at all, let alone in oaths or using it in vain. And so on to some of the other commandments. We have the requirement to keep the Sabbath. This is a compulsory day of rest. And in a society where people tend to work far too hard, and of course in ancient societies where people especially, and today even, were inclined to make others work far too hard, either as slaves or bonded workers or whatever, imposing a compulsory day of rest in which people have to put aside time for recreation and also to reflect on the deeper things of life is an extremely good idea and extremely necessary, and one that we're in danger of losing today. Honoring your father and mother, cherishing the vulnerable and elderly, those who have no other helper. Indeed, paying back your parents for the love and cherishing and nurturing that they gave you as they become increasingly dependent with age. It is so tempting to neglect them, to move on, to say, well, they're part of my past, I'm not interested anymore. That is a risk and a worry in any society, and how important it is that we should be constantly reminded to nurture and cherish the frail and elderly, not only our own parents, but those wherever we find them. And so on to the classic prohibitions of immoral behavior, murder, adultery, and theft. I don't feel the need to spend too long on these because they're kind of obvious, especially the murder and the theft. But consider the ways in which theft is not just nicking somebody else's stuff, but the grand corporate theft of the unjust structures of a society in which the goods are not justly and equitably distributed. And that is something what the prohibition against theft is talking about, as well as saying you shouldn't nick other people's stuff. Adultery, well, that's one it's always worth mentioning, because that sounds as though thou shalt not commit adultery is spoiling everyone's fun. Why shouldn't we have commit adultery? Let's be relaxed about things like that. And well, in theory, that may be the case. And then, of course, when somebody's cheated on you, you feel very differently about things like that, and consider that it's dishonoring the promises you've made to somebody you perhaps once loved, and also dishonoring other people's sexual relationships, and causing a great deal of misery and damage, as any familiarity with people who are undergoing a divorce or suffering the after effects of a divorce will tell you. Moving on to the last couple, I'm going to do those in reverse order. The prohibition to covet. Well, envy of other people's good fortune is such a corrosive thing, and it's something we're encouraged to have through advertising. Other people have got better things than I have, got a better life than I have, and I want a piece of it. And this can generate enormous resentment as well as discontent. And let's try to be content with what God has given us, however small or mean it may be, and deal with that as best we can. Bearing false witness, I feel particularly strongly about this one at the moment, because this is the damaging effect of lies, not just in the court of law, but in society at large. And my worry at the moment, with all the proliferation of conspiracy theories, of fake news, of false statements, of deliberate lying, of deliberate manipulation, it has got to the stage in our society today where not only are people telling lies on an industrial scale and not even thinking they need to apologize for it, but that many of us have lost the ability to discern the difference between falsehood and truth. And that is a terrible and dangerous situation to be in. And it's one in which I would exhort us all to look back to that ancient list of 10 rules, the 10 commandments, and find therein a deep and divine wisdom. May God bless you all, and I hope your day goes well.